Hype Podcast Studios.
Hello, I'm Kevin Heywood from KSH Safety Services. Can you guess what my middle name is? Safety is my middle name, and that's the name of my podcast.
Safety is his middle name, keeping you safe, keeping your reputation in the game.
Hello, today we're going to talk about asbestos, and with my special guest, Mark Smith from AskMAS. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Kevin. You okay?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. Thanks for joining us.
No problem.
Tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name's Mark Smith. I run a small independent asbestos company called AskMAS.co.uk. I'm a health and safety consultant and an asbestos consultant. I've been in the asbestos industry about 20 years now. I've worked for national companies and I've worked for the smaller companies as well, both doing the asbestos removal side and also the asbestos surveying side. So, I mean, I'd hope to think I've got a good knowledge of the business and obviously of the industry as well.
Sounds like. What exactly is asbestos?
So, asbestos is obviously it's a naturally occurring mineral. It's a rock. It comes from the ground. So it's a fibrous mineral, and it's obviously got these fibres in it. And obviously the rock it's mined. It's still mined in various countries today. It was never mined in the UK, but obviously we did import they reckon about 6 million tonnes we imported into the UK. So I mean, it is currently still mined in countries like Russia, Kazakhstan and places like that as well. They do still mine it.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean 6 million tonnes imported into the UK, they reckon.
Wow. So, I believe there's quite a number of different types of asbestos.
Yeah, I mean, so really, there's 6 types of asbestos, but really there's only 3 main types that we sort of come across within obviously the industry and obviously within sort of the building products and building materials of today. So you've got Chrysotile, which is your blue type asbestos. I mean, obviously blue, you're looking at spread coatings, pipe insulation, thermal insulating materials. You've also got your brown asbestos or the Amosite asbestos. Now, you find that your products like insulating boards, it's like your fire retardant materials. And then you've got your Chrysotile asbestos, which is your white asbestos. You find that in obviously floor tiles and your cement type products, like your roof sheeting on farm buildings and things like that. So obviously Chrysotile was the main one imported, and because it is the main one in all the building products, like you say, in the cement, floor tiles and things like that as well. Yeah. Even in Artex as well. So obviously Artex, the finish that you see in the old properties. So
why was it used? Why did it become popular?
I mean, so obviously asbestos really, obviously it was used because it's a great additive to then add into other products to then make a product sort of better. So obviously, asbestos was then mixed with various other products to then give products like a fire retardantness, an insulatingness. It's a weather protector. I mean, it's chemical resistant. So basically what they did, they sort of mixed the asbestos with all these other obviously products. And obviously that's why it's in the building products, because it just give the product a better condition, obviously a better material, better insulating factor. So yeah, I mean, that's basically why it was.
Was it cheap
used.
As well?
Yeah, I mean, so again, probably one of the main reasons, Kevin, you're right there, is it was cheap. Probably one of the main reasons that everybody did use asbestos, it was just cheap. It was cheap to buy. It was obviously cheap to import, and it was then just cheap to add into the other products, and obviously to make the products that it then needed to do.
Yeah. So you hit on a few things where asbestos is found. What's the main type of products?
So looking at, I could probably sit here all day and list obviously the building materials that do contain asbestos. You're looking at all things obviously within the properties that we sort of work in, and then the properties that obviously people during construction work in as well. Again, it's in various types of properties. You're looking at schools, industrial buildings, council buildings, social housing, and the other one is in domestic properties as well. A lot of people just think asbestos obviously is in commercial type buildings, but it's not. It is in domestic properties. And obviously again, it's in obviously your building materials. We're looking at fascias, soffits, roof tiles, roof sheeting, insulating boards, Artex. So Artex, asbestos reinforced texture coating. So obviously that's the interior finish that you can see internally in properties. It was massive throughout the 80s. Yeah. Obviously within properties. Bitumen adhesives, pipe insulations, boiler insulation material. I mean, the list is sort of endless. And then, you know, we can even look at like Bakelite type products. You know, they even made, obviously, the old type fawns out of that. There's obviously
little butter knives that people still
butter
have.
knives, ironing boards, things like that as well. You know, the list is sort of endless.
Yeah.
And remember, it was an additive, so it's and the asbestos was added into the product to make that material.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I used to live in an RAF, a former RAF base in Doncaster, and full of it, absolutely full of it. And I used to wander around. My wife used to wonder what I was doing, and I was just looking, making sure it was still intact. And
yeah.
you know.
I mean, that is the thing with asbestos. We'll probably pick this up a bit later on.
Yeah.
Obviously, like you just mentioned then, a lot of people worry that, I've got asbestos in my property. Yeah, you might have got asbestos in your property, but as long as that asbestos is in good condition,
Exactly.
you can live with that asbestos in your property. And that's really what it's then all about. It is about the management of it and assessing the condition of the material. Like you say, I mean, you can live with it as long as it's in good condition. But if it is in bad condition, then obviously that, it is a bit of a different story.
So what does it look like? You mentioned fibres earlier on. But
Yeah, I mean, so again, you sort of always get this question, what does asbestos look like? And again, it's a hard one to answer in a way. Obviously, as I said earlier, you have got the three types of asbestos, which are blue, brown and white. But asbestos is never differentiated by the colour of the material. It's not like blue products are blue, brown products are brown and white colours are white. As I've said to you, because it's an additive that's added into the material, it's not like you can look at a material and straight away think it's asbestos. I mean, all I would say then on that, if anybody ever comes across a material, then they're not sure, they think it could be asbestos, or they're ever not sure what that material is, all my advice would be obviously just to stop what you're doing and just find out what that material is. Again, we'll probably pick that up a little bit later on as well. But again, just obviously while we're here, we might as well obviously just mention it.
Yeah, definitely.
The safety aspect of it as well.
Definitely. So why is it so dangerous?
So obviously, like I've just said, I mean, asbestos can, be in a room, and as long as it's not disturbed, it's never really going to do anybody any harm or damage. Obviously, it's the breaking down of the asbestos, or anybody damaging the asbestos. It's actually the release of the asbestos fibres. It's the asbestos fibres when they get released into the air. Obviously, people then breathe them fibres in, and obviously, unfortunately, because it's a naturally occurring mineral, your body doesn't naturally break down the asbestos fibre. So basically, the asbestos fibre gets stuck in the lining of the lungs. Basically, what your body then tries to do is try to then fight that off, and it basically calcifies the lungs and causes a scarring on the lungs, and just basically causes a bit of thickening on the lungs. Unfortunately, then over time, that's obviously having a depreciation, obviously, on your lungs and on your body and your lung capacity. And obviously, that's when, potentially you then start looking at, obviously, the asbestos diseases that are out there. Obviously, we've got things like, obviously, mesothelioma, asbestosis, which are all obviously serious diseases that you can obviously contract from exposure to asbestos. Just probably one thing then to mention is the latency period. So obviously the latency period it's basically after first exposure to asbestos is when you then start feeling the effects. So what I then mean by that is obviously, if I was then exposed to asbestos then today, I wouldn't then naturally next week wake up with a bit of a cough and think, I've got a tickle, I need to go and see the doctor. What the latency period is, it can be up to 10 to 60 years to then show itself, which is what they call the latency period. So basically, in a way, it could be a bit of a ticking time bomb within yourself that you then could have been exposed, but you're only then going to pick that up then later in life. But again, the key thing to mention here as well, it is all about exposure, the amount of exposure that you've then been exposed to, the amount of times you've been exposed to it as well. So again, although all exposure to asbestos can be dangerous, if it was one exposure, then again, it might not be as serious as then multiple exposures, or doing it on obviously, as part of your work or on your daily life.
That's right. I mean, the HSE produce statistics every year of the number of workplace deaths and so forth, but they keep asbestos separate. Like normally, in the normal workplace, you get 100, 150 maximum deaths per year. But asbestos, it's about 2,500.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, obviously, asbestos is still one of the biggest killers then out there. And then really, obviously, that is then probably down to really sort of a bit of lack of knowledge within the industry. And obviously, unfortunately, there's still obviously people out there that, are not then adhering to regulations and doing then, obviously, then what they then should be doing.
Yeah, definitely. Particularly in the years gone by before the regulations came in.
Of course,
as well.
and as well, because obviously we're still then sort of, 70s, 80s, 60s, 70s, 80s were the main, obviously, eras when these building materials were putting in. As I've said before, because of the latency period, unfortunately, the builders and the contractors who put this material into the buildings, they're only now contracting the disease due to the latency period.
Yeah.
So again, you might have put it in during the 60s, 70s, but unfortunately, obviously, because of the latency period, they're only now contracting asbestos-related diseases. And they're going to the doctors and obviously, unfortunately, finding out that they were exposed back then. Because at the end of the day, obviously, the rules and regulations were different back then. They didn't understand, obviously, the ill health effects of asbestos. They just understood how, cheap asbestos was and that it was this sort of great product that you could put into all these building products that you could be then multi-use within, obviously, the building materials of today.
Yeah, it all sounds doom and gloom, but there are laws in place to.
Yeah, I mean,
to help.
it does all sound doom and gloom. You're correct. You're correct. So obviously there is various laws in place with asbestos and for asbestos. So obviously the main one we're probably best obviously looking at is obviously Control of Asbestos Regulations 2012 or CAR 2012. I mean, just to keep it obviously simple, that is the main obviously regulation obviously out there for people obviously to manage their asbestos, and within that there is always other sub-regulations. So duty to manage, obviously, regulation 4 and things like that is obviously what obviously, building supervisors, building managers and things like that then obviously should be doing.
So what are they meant to do
then? So obviously really, I mean, the duty, I always say this because obviously a lot of people just think as long as I've got an asbestos survey in place, then that then covers me. Unfortunately, the duty is also to manage your asbestos. So just by having an asbestos survey in place doesn't obviously always mean that you're then going to be covered. You obviously then need to then manage the asbestos that's in place. That means by obviously having an asbestos management plan, obviously for your site, or a building register, which basically lists obviously all the building materials. So again, if you're a building manager, obviously, and you need an asbestos survey in place, as long as the building is built before the year 2000. If your building is built before the year 2000, then obviously legally you do need an asbestos management survey in place. And obviously, an asbestos management survey is basically a basic walkthrough of the building or the property, basically looking for front-facing materials that could be disturbed by normal use of the building or disturbed by, obviously, day-to-day contractors or your own contractors then obviously working within that building.
Year 2000, because that was the year it was banned, is that right?
Yes, obviously it was 1999, obviously was the year that obviously asbestos was then ultimately obviously banned from import and banned from use. So that's why the duty then obviously forms like that as well. So yeah, I mean, the big one is just to say, obviously, building owners, building users, don't just think by having an asbestos survey that is the duty. Make sure you do obviously ask them asbestos management plan, asbestos building registers as well. Obviously, that then brings all the survey information together into one document, and it's basically a quick use document that you can use for all the asbestos that's on your site. The survey information, the building register, and obviously the asbestos management plan can also be passed to contractors that come to site as well. For instance, if you're having some work done, it might be part of your induction that literally you then provide these contractors with this information. And obviously when the contractors come to site, you provide the information, you sign an induction, and basically then they're aware of obviously asbestos risks on site. Or you could provide that information prior to them coming to site, and obviously they could then form risk assessments and method statements based on the information that's then been provided as well.
Yeah. So you provide all that to the contractor do the risk assessments and so forth. Do they need any training?
Yeah, so again, obviously, like I've said as well, a lot of it with asbestos is actually understanding asbestos. Like I've said earlier on, obviously asbestos is only dangerous when it then becomes disturbed. So obviously by doing obviously training, you then understand this, you then start understanding asbestos products, obviously fibre release and things like that. So again, anybody, who's in a position where they need to manage or know about asbestos, as a minimum, they should be carrying out obviously asbestos awareness training, in my opinion. Yeah. Obviously, you can do that online via obviously the computer suites that you can get. I mean, you can also do that in person as well. I mean, I am a former asbestos awareness trainer, and in my opinion, I do think obviously sitting and attending a course is a lot better than doing it via computer. Obviously, like I've said, I've got 20 years experience in the industry, so obviously I can bring that across within the presentation when I do asbestos awareness training. So again, all I would say is, if you ever want to know about asbestos, then just set a simple asbestos awareness course, either online or in person. And again, you've also got to ensure that it's relevant to obviously the work that then you're undertaking as well. If you're thinking about doing asbestos removal, non-licensed or licensed, that is a different, obviously, kettle of fish. Obviously, there is different training then for that.
Yeah.
Obviously, non-licensed asbestos training, which will teach you to then start to remove the non-licensed products, your cement products, flue pipes, floor tiles, things like that. You can then take it on a stage further, and you could do your licensed asbestos removal training also, and that then teaches you to remove your high-risk products as well, insulating boards, thermal insulation and things like that as well.
Yeah.
So again, at the end of the day, if you're not sure, just get some training done. Obviously, find out, do some research. I mean, what I will say as well, I mean, the HC website does provide some good information, reference asbestos, reference to control asbestos regulations, reference regulation for duty to manage. It basically tells you, types of asbestos, what types of asbestos surveys are out there, if you need a survey, when you need a survey. So again, if you ever want any guidance, the HC website is a good place to go.
Definitely. Sometimes even after training, it's difficult to identify it. I think I contacted you earlier in the week. I think it turned out to be fiberglass because it had fibres on it.
Kevin, the amount of calls I get on a weekly basis, I mean, WhatsApp pictures, videos. I mean, even over the years that everybody sort of says, "Oh, there's Mark. We'll send him that. He'll let us know what it is." I get it all the time. So yeah.
But you'd rather people do that anyway.
100%. I'd much rather people then send me a picture, pick up the phone, and even describe it to you, ask me a question. I might straight away then say to you, no, that doesn't sound like asbestos to me. Then I might then say to you, well, in my opinion, I'm not sure, or I can't then tell by the picture. Let's get it sampled, let's get it surveyed. Let's then find out what that material then is.
Yeah.
So,
you mentioned homeowners, and the likes of Artex, which is obviously, well, the old Artex is definitely full of asbestos.
Yeah.
What does a homeowner do if they want to remove it, or they want to if it looks damaged? Or
I mean, so again, obviously the big thing is that asbestos is in commercial properties, and it's also in your domestic properties. It's best obviously by then starting off with that, although the regulations kind of be a bit different when it is your own personal property. At the end of the day, asbestos and the danger of asbestos are always the same, and that then doesn't change. So within a domestic property, people do think that, I'm not going to have lots of asbestos-containing materials, but unfortunately sometimes then that's not the case. I mean, looking from the top of the property working down, I mean, you're looking at roof tiles, you're looking at soffit boards, fascia panels, window mastics, window putty, insulating boards, floor tiles, bitumen adhesives, and then like you said, the Artex. So obviously Artex, asbestos reinforced textured coating. Obviously, the asbestos were then put into obviously the textured coating, and obviously during the 80s, it was probably slapped on every wall or front-facing material that everybody then could ever get it on. Now, unfortunately, the asbestos is obviously then dangerous, and obviously, you've got to be careful of it. But again, as I do keep saying, asbestos is only dangerous if it's then disturbed. It's only when people start obviously drilling into the material, they start sanding it, they start then breaking it, and you're then exposing, you're breathing the fibres, that's when you start obviously getting the exposure into it. So again, obviously homeowners, I would then say, same again as I've always said, if you're ever in doubt or you're not sure what then that material is then obviously get advice, get a survey, get some sampling done, contact an expert, don't then do it yourself, seek that clarification before then obviously then doing that work or obviously breaking that board or doing whatever you then do so wish.
So, I mean, people like decorating every now and then and so forth. So if they had enough of the Artex, but it looks in good condition, what would you suggest, like board under it? Or
I mean, again,
there's
there's many of options then for that as well. I mean, over the years, obviously working within the industry, I've seen different methods and different ways of people then doing this. I have got to then say sometimes, obviously, removal would always be the ultimate, best option. But unfortunately, due to budgets and things like that, that isn't always obviously possible. So like you've said, I've seen it then overboarded, where people obviously have no-nails battens onto the ceiling and then a fixed plasterboard onto the battens. Basically, that provides a bit of a space between it, like a bit of a buffer, a bit of a barrier between the asbestos material and obviously the board that you're then putting in. But again, just things like that, you've obviously got to then remember, if you then do sell the property as well, you're just then ensuring that you do pass on that information then to the next buyer, really, is that it's there because you've obviously covered it up. But if they then was to come in and they drill through it and drill into it, then obviously, there could be a potential exposure. So it's just then understanding that risk and obviously passing then that risk and that knowledge on. But again, I mean, obviously I've seen people obviously plaster over Artex and things like that as well. It's really up to each individual to obviously do what we do. But again, it's always about the condition of the materials. If it's in good condition, it's fine. Obviously, if it starts to deteriorate, starts to flake and things like that, then obviously that's when potentially it could start causing issues, and that you might want to have a look at it and get a contractor in.
Yeah, definitely. We, with some of our clients, work in a big, very old, 100-year-old business park, basically, and there's a lot of work happening to knock down some of the old buildings and so forth. Now, do they with demolition, do they have to remove it first, or if they know it's there?
Yeah,
so
basically, obviously, without going deeply into the types of survey out there are different types of survey. So an asbestos survey is a basic brief look at the building for asbestos, and obviously there's types of survey out there, which is a demolition survey. Yeah. So demolition survey has got to be, so far as reasonable practical, to assess all areas of that building for asbestos-containing materials prior to the demolition of that building. So basically what you're then trying to do is just access every nook, cranny, subfloor, your duct space, roof space, wherever you can to assess for asbestos, to ensure that report you provide to the contractor basically confirms there's no asbestos in the building. That gives then obviously the safety then to obviously put the building plan or the demolition plan into place to then knock down the said building. Yeah. Obviously, just while we're obviously on that, there's obviously something as well called the refurbishment survey. So a refurbishment survey is then a bit more of an intrusive look into a space or location prior to refurbishment work. So basically, if you was to say to me, I'm refurbing a set of offices and the offices are built before the year 2000, I might say to you, Kevin, just give us a bit of a brief of what you're doing. You might say to me, I'm taking this wall down, I'm taking this ceiling down, this floor's then coming up and things like that. And when I carry out that survey, I just ensure that the survey's carried out in them areas. So my survey in a way mimics the work that you're undertaking. Yeah. So again, that provides you with a document the way you can obviously do your refurbishment plan off this, basically knowing that the areas that you're going to survey are free, or as far as reasonable practical, free from asbestos. Yeah. And again, we've got obviously the management survey as well, which again is just the simple day-to-day look through a building of front-facing materials. And again, there's a survey out there called a re-inspection survey as well. Obviously, when you have a management survey, you've got to re-inspect your asbestos annually for its condition. Remember, it's all about the condition. We know we've got asbestos in the building, but it's all about monitoring the condition of that asbestos, which is then picked up in our asbestos re-inspection survey.
I bet you have to crawl into some weird places when you're doing your
yeah,
job.
I mean, Kevin,
lift shafts and things, so no doubt.
Well, like I said, having been in the industry 20 years, and obviously having worked from an operative up to a manager level, I've been in all kinds of commercial, industrial, all types of building. I've been in duct space, I've been in crawl spaces, loft spaces, vats, tanks, silos.
What happens when asbestos is removed? Where does it go?
So, obviously, when asbestos-containing materials are obviously removed from any type of property, obviously, the asbestos removal contractor company obviously carrying out the work. I mean, they don't disturb it. They put in relevant control measures when they're removing it. Obviously, dust suppression, obviously things like that, control removal. Obviously, H-type vacuum, obviously vacuum the dust away, dust suppression units and things like that. So basically, them guys remove it as safe as possible. They bag it, they double bag it. Obviously, then they'll put it into the skip. Obviously, the skip company will come along and all asbestos-containing materials go to landfill. So basically, they're double bag placed into the skip and they literally go to landfill and they're buried then back into the ground. Obviously, there's different countries out there that do it differently. Obviously, I've heard of some countries out there that encapsulate it in concrete and obviously things like that as well. And there was talk a couple of years ago about then trying to obviously do things like that as well, is recycle obviously the asbestos-containing products, the cement products, into sort of concrete-based materials to use for like footings and things like that as well. Yeah. But at the minute, it just gets removed as carefully as possible and literally just ends up in landfill.
Wow, it's quite interesting. I mean, the landfill. Is it double bagged?
Of course, yeah. I mean, obviously it's double bagged. It'll be, it's sealed and it's safe as possibly can. But you then got to think in sort of 20, 30 years time. The land where the asbestos landfill site is probably more likely going to be built on as well. Yeah. So again, they would probably then cap that land and obviously then start building on it. And you've got to think obviously because of the asbestos, because of what asbestos is. It's never going to degrade. It's never going to go anywhere. So technically, it's always going to stay within the ground. Yeah. For as long as it's then there. So you might find in another 100 years' time where the landfill site is, they might then start digging that up and then obviously transferring it onwards, and it'll just be an onward cycle. Yeah. But at the minute, it goes straight to landfill.
I always find it fascinating when they're removing it. You did a survey for one of my clients on a lift shaft because they were having a lift replaced.
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
And watching the people after you'd done the survey doing the actual removal, it's like all the tunnels and the tents and everything.
Yes,
so
yeah,
they're completely...
of course. Yeah, I mean,
obviously
it's obviously that material was an insulating board material, if I remember rightly. So it was like a fire retardant, obviously fire lining material. And obviously they had to then set up the full lift shaft. If I remember rightly, they scaffolded out the full lift shaft. They had to obviously have all the decontamination unit. The guys would have been in the mask, the paper suits, and then removing it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a high-profile industry. I mean, highly regulated by obviously HSE, and obviously, you know, it's a licensed industry as well for the licensed contractors. You know, they have got to apply for a license and hold a license to remove it. So
things like that, you have to inform the HSE beforehand, don't you?
Of course, yes. Obviously, you know, your licensed type products, obviously, such thing as obviously the notification, the notification of asbestos. You know, obviously, the 14-day notification that you have to submit prior to then coming to site to carry out the removal. ASB 5 document is obviously that then document. That's basically what you submit to the HSE. Basically, what you're doing, you're telling the HSE that you carry out asbestos removal. Basically, you're inviting them to come to site and carry out an audit and inspection.
And they did. I think they came twice on that work.
Yeah, I mean, again, obviously the HSE will look at the type of the material, and if that is then potentially connected maybe to a RID or an incident or an accident, they might then come and visit then because of that as well.
Yeah, they came to check on the contractor doing it.
Of course,
well.
I mean, the asbestos industry and the asbestos contractors in the asbestos industry usually just set up their sites, you know, willing and knowing that an HSE inspector is probably then going to come to site. And if you don't, that's really the way it then should be set up.
Yeah, of course.
You always think an inspector is then going to obviously come to your site and obviously carry that inspection and that audit. So, yeah.
So do you have to have medicals being in that sector, you know, working regularly?
Yeah,
just
so
checking
you know,
yourself and make sure.
Even now as an asbestos surveyor, I then still carry out an asbestos medical. So obviously every 2 years I do go for an asbestos medical. Like I said, I've been in the industry 20 years. So obviously I still keep up on asbestos medical. You know, it's just obviously just for my knowledge, just to know, you know, if I'm all right. And obviously my lungs are obviously in good condition from working in the industry as well, obviously over the years. You know, it's a requirement within the industry as well to do that. Just obviously can they sort of, what they do, they sort of plot it on a bit of a graph. They do a lung capacity test where you blow into the tube and it sort of shoots the monitor up the tube. And again, they do that over the 2 years and they sort of plot it on a bit of a graph. And what they can show is any depreciation within your lungs as well. And they can also sort of maybe pinpoint it to what year you potentially got it as well, just because then it'll show the depreciation then of it as well.
Yeah.
So.
There's been a few high-profile cases, probably most notably the 9/11 incident.
Yes,
which was obviously 9/11. The two twin towers were built in the 70s, full of asbestos as a fire retardant. Yeah, and then they suddenly collapsed and spread across half the city. So,
I mean, so obviously it says that obviously within obviously the twin towers building there was spray coatings. So that's your blue asbestos that we mentioned earlier, and obviously had fire insulating boards for brown asbestos as a fire retardant material. They said that was on the structure, the internal structure of, and obviously 9/11 of the tower. Obviously, we all know then what happened. And if we all think back and remember the videos, of obviously all the people that were walking around, they were all covered in that white powder. I would probably say that 99% of that said white powder probably would have been an asbestos-containing material. Obviously, you've seen all the first responders as well that were obviously all then covered in said material. And again, obviously that material was spread, obviously throughout, obviously in Lower Manhattan, obviously throughout all them areas. And again, it then just continued and continued and continued. You've got to think how much rubble was then removed from ground zero, when that rubble then went, you know, the knock-on effect of then all that as well. And as we said before, obviously we did mention the latency period as well. So, you know, although during that atrocity many people then died, the actual true figure is only just now coming to show. And that is due to the latency period. Obviously, remember the latency period is after first exposure when you then start feeling the ill effects. Yeah. Unfortunately, over the last sort of 10 or so years is where a lot of the first responders have obviously started then contracting asbestos-related diseases, obviously mesothelioma and asbestosis. And unfortunately, that is then from being that first responder and then responding then on that day as well. Yeah. And as well, you know, exposure does have the ripple effect as well. You've then got to think of the families of them workers and that obviously on that exposure as well. Yeah. So yeah, although the atrocity had obviously many deaths, you know, the true figures are still sort of being published due to obviously the latency period with asbestos, and obviously people only just then discovering they've got asbestos-related disease.
It's a huge issue, isn't it, now?
It is, yeah. I mean, it is a huge issue. I mean, again, I don't know if you've ever known of anybody who's contracted asbestos-related disease, but unfortunately it's not an eyesore, it's not a pretty death. So, you know, unfortunately, if you are diagnosed with mesothelioma, you know, it is uncurable, and unfortunately it is then a matter of time before you will pass away, unfortunately. So it is one to take serious. And, you know, I employ all contractors, building managers, operative supervisors and all workers, you know, if just be wary of asbestos. If you ever come across it or you're not sure of what that material is, just stop what you're doing, ask the question.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, years gone by as well, some film sets used asbestos for the likes of Snow, it was particularly in the black and white era.
yeah, I mean, obviously, correct there. Obviously, you know, it's sort of well out there. Obviously, the Wizard of Oz, the Wizard of Oz, the Snow used in Wizard of Oz was obviously Chrysotile white asbestos, so that could be up to 100% pure white asbestos was then used as well. There's many different products that obviously out there that contain asbestos. There was, I mean, just for instance, the Old Kent cigarette, which I think was an American brand. The actual filter within the cigarette is blue asbestos.
Wow.
So if you just think, you know, you put that cigarette into your mouth, then you're inhaling that. You're actually inhaling them fibres then straight into your lung lining, and then them sticking into your lung lining. And the Old Kent cigarette was one of the most famous brands of cigarette, and it was sold throughout, obviously, throughout America. You know, it's frightening. You agree, and you know, when you start then knuckling down and looking at all the asbestos products and all the bits and pieces it was then used in, there's lots of stories out there like that.
Yeah, definitely. If you could leave the audience watching and listening, what one non-obvious piece of advice on asbestos? What do you think?
I mean, the advice for me, and I've probably said this multiple times. At the end of the day, if you're not sure what that building material is, just stop what you're doing. Stop what you're doing. Ask somebody else. Ask your supervisor. Ask your manager. Find the register. Find that survey. If you've got none of them in place, then get it sampled. Get a professional in. Yeah. Before you break it, before you do whatever you're doing, let's find out what it is. You know, the cost of sampling and the cost of then surveying would far outweigh the cost of removal, the cost of decontamination, and the cost of obviously clearing it. You know, insurance costs and the other costs that then would be involved with that as well. So again, guys, if in doubt, stay out, and get it tested.
Well, thank you very much, Mark. I've really enjoyed that conversation. Really interesting.
No problem, Kevin. Thank you very much for having me on the show. Thank you very much.
Not a problem. And hopefully some of the viewers and listeners take action on the comments you mentioned.
100%. Yeah, I mean, end of the day, just stay safe out there.
As Mark mentioned a few moments ago, there is asbestos awareness training available. KSH Safety Services do actually offer an online asbestos awareness course, details of which are available on the screen in a few moments. You've been watching Safety is My Middle Name. Thank you. Take care.
KSH, KSH, KSH.